welcome or welcome back to Beauty Bees. I'm Iris. I hit pan in a second eyeshadow in this project. I know that's not very impressive considering this is update 5, but we gotta celebrate the small victories, okay? So I've actually been putting off filming this video for a few days because I felt in my bones that I was so close to hitting pan, and I was like, let's just give it one more day. Let's just give it one more day. I bet I'll hit pan tomorrow. And this morning, it happened. This is Luxie Get Naked. And I think maybe you can see, there's pan right there. I really like this shade. It doesn't look like a whole lot to me in the pan, but swatched out, it has this sort of greenish to pink flip in this sort of champagne base. It's very pretty. It's very interesting. I've been wearing it in a lot of my recent videos because I've been wearing this constantly to try to hit pan, and it's surprisingly easy to wear for every day. One look that I really liked doing with this was to put a pink like all over my lid and then up into the crease, and then layer this over the lid. I thought that brought out a little bit more of that pink. I found it to be very shifty and pretty, but still neutral enough to wear in pretty much any situation. And then I would add a little demure little wing to round out the eye look. But I have hit pan. That is the second shade that I have hit pan on in this project. And it was just in the nick of time too, because I was due to roll this out of the project today anyway. So let's now talk about the 5 other shades that I still have in the project. The first one I just rolled in the last update. This is again from Luxie, and this is the shade Phone Home. I believe that I rolled this in for the prompt, a pop culture reference. Bright green has actually probably a pretty similar pigment that's giving this a pink shift as well. I quite like it. It's easier to wear than you would think. It is not as glowing green on the eyes. I definitely see more of the pink base, or I guess the pink flash on the eyes than I see in the pan, but still not the most subtle shade you're ever going to find, but very pretty. I haven't used this super often. I would say I've probably used this 4 times in the past month, so I'm not winning any panning awards, but it's better than the next shade we're going to talk about. That shade is from the Butter London Teddy Girl palette. I've never gotten good use on this palette, and I told myself I was going to work on the shade Penelope, which is the sort of red violet shade down in the right corner. Had to check that. And I don't think I used it once. It's pretty. There's nothing wrong with the quality of this palette. I just didn't use it. I haven't been using a lot of deeper shades anyway. I just haven't been reaching for those. They haven't been part of my makeup routine recently. But I should have used this, because first of all, I told myself I was going to use it. It's in my project pan. But also I think it would be really pretty, well, it would have been really pretty with Get Naked. And I think it would be pretty with Phone Home as well. I do love a mint and a berry together. So next month, going to actually use it. Maybe I should bring this whole palette into like deck of panning or something. That might be a good project to get me to actually reach for it, because it is pretty. It's not exciting, but it's pretty, and I never dislike the look that I end up with when I use this. It's just getting myself to use it. That's the problem. I had to do some adjustments, so hopefully things didn't change too much. The next shade has also just been in since last month. This is from ColourPop, and I was working on the shade Limelight. This is the Cabana Club palette, if I didn't mention that, and it's really pretty. I'm wearing it today, actually. I have an orangey, corally shimmer all over my lid, and then I layered Limelight over probably the inner 2/3. Here is it on my finger. It's a really pretty, slightly greeny yellow gold. Definitely next to Phone Home. I keep wanting to call the shade ET. That's the inspiration, I think, but nope, Phone Home. It Limelight definitely looks very yellow, but I think you can tell in this palette versus a true like matte yellow. This does have a little bit of green. I can see where they're getting the name Limelight from. It's a really pretty shade. I've used it. It's a really pretty shade. I've used it. I just don't see visual progress. I'm so slow with panning eyeshadow. I think that I can tell in comparison to some of the other shades in this palette that this one is looking better used. I mean, I can look at this blue cool off, and certainly Limelight looks used, but it doesn't look anywhere close to pan, or like it could be anywhere close to pan with another 3 months of consistent use the way I've been using it so far. And I've been wearing this at least once a week. I would say probably close to 7 or 8 times over the month I've worn this. It just doesn't really look like it. So been working on that. 2 more shades that have been in the project for a while. The first is from the Lorac Mini Pro palette in Mystic Oak. I love this palette. It is very, very pretty, and the shade I've been working on is this bronze. It's so beautiful. Great as a one shadow look. Has this gorgeous shine to it. This is deep enough to be a little bit on the sultry side, but not so deep that it feels inappropriate for every day. It's really pretty. I love how this sort of rosy shine really brings out the green in my eyes. I feel really pretty wearing this. I like it a lot. I mean, even next to these Luxie shades, which are that sort of flaky indie texture, this Lorac just looks so eye-catching. It's a very smooth kind of metallic, but its shine just parallels anything that those flaky textures can get you to. Okay, and then the last shade I've been working on, I'm actually wearing today too. I have a little bit of this up in my crease that's blending out the orange. This is from the Viseart Petite Pro 3 palettes, and I'm working on this like light, sort of rosy brown. I always think it looks like a straight up cool tone brown in the context of the palette, but then I swatch it out and I realize just how much rose and mauve it has in it. Super pretty, sort of the matte version of that Viseart, sort of the matte version of the Lorac shade we were talking about earlier. It's one that I use a lot. It's just I don't use a lot of shadow every time I dip into this. I think you can tell that it is looking used. Well, maybe you can't tell. In person, I can definitely see that this is a pretty well-used shadow, but it doesn't have much of a dip going on. It has a tiny little shelf almost right here, where it's very near the top of the pan, and there's this sort of dip in that happens, I don't know, a couple millimeters into the product. Don't know why it ends up looking like that, but I've been really enjoying working on this. I think it's gorgeous. And then I've already drawn my new shade. The prompt that I ended up pulling, which if I didn't plug this earlier, I'm using Makeup with Lainey's prompt list that she used last year. I will have her channel linked down below. I strongly recommend that you check her out. I edited the prompt list just a little bit because I know that I am a very slow project panner, so I didn't want to bring in like a shade that I hated or anything like that. I wanted to keep it to prompts that I would be happy working on those shades for 4 months. So there's some of the logic behind that. And the prompt that I ended up pulling was very appropriate for this season. It was a shade that reminds you of summer. Excellent timing. I really loved pulling that. And I am wearing the shade that I pulled in today. I just wanted to test it to make sure that I would be happy wearing it consistently over the next couple of months. And I think it's lovely. It is this orangey coral shade that I have going on. Now, I don't have a name for this. This is, I believe, from an old Wet n Wild 32 pan palette that I had. I ended up repressing a lot of the shades from that palette into these little round pans, and I've been honestly slowly decluttering them ever since. Kind of a bummer, but this one has stuck around. It's a little bit different for my collection. Actually, the only really similar shade that I have is actually in this Cabana Club palette. I realized that as I was getting ready this morning. And, oh, wrong shade. It is pretty similar to Copa Cutie. Had to clear off some shadow to be able to read that. So I would really like to get some use on this. It'd be really cool if I could hit pan. I think I'm actually really close. I tend to sort of make a dip in the pan as I'm repressing. Don't know how people manage to get these flat or nearly flat repressed single shadows, but I've never mastered that art. And it's a fairly pigmented shade. It is just so completely outside my usual wheelhouse. Swatched out, I think it looks a little bit more pink than it does in the pan. I definitely see more orange in the pan, but I actually really like that because I tend to prefer pinks on myself over oranges. And this coral, I think, is just so bright and perfect for summer. I think it is just a perfect shade for this time of year without being too far out of my comfort zone. I'm really excited to work on this. And I believe that wraps up my Project Pan update. Here we have the shades that I will be working on, minus Luxie Get Naked. So everything is pretty mid-tone this month. I would say that even this sort of falls into that mid-tone category, though the way I use it, it tends to function like a much deeper shade, just because I do prefer these overall pretty light eyeshadows, and this is deep enough to provide that contrast that I'm looking for. So thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing, and I hope that I will see you all in the next one. Bye guys!